There is a very well-known filmmaker, a Canadian filmmaker who does documentaries, who much of his career is based on the premise that if you take descendants of people who were involved in a very important event, maybe not an important event, but some specific event that happened in a particular place, and maybe those descendants know something about it, maybe they don't even care about the event. But if you take them and put them in the premise, on the premises of where that event happened, that something happens and it's tangible, visible, and it is the basis upon which he has made quite a number of documentaries. The documentaries are not of the event itself, they're of the descendants responding to being in a particular location with other descendants that they may or may not know. From that perspective, that's his perspective. I proposed to Griffis Arts Center that I come and spend some time in New London, specifically going through my father's files, which are quite plentiful actually, because he died when he was 36. He didn't have a chance to go through and clean out his files, so because he worked with the dance festival in the summer sessions, they saved the files, and in many respects those files are quite full because of that untimely demise, so to speak. So for me, it was very much about those files, but it was also about just simply being in New London, of like what would happen to me personally from just kind of coming and hanging out in New London. Looking around, I've been to the local history museum, the Shaw Mansion, and as well as to City Hall, to Gard Arts Center, to quite a number of places, in addition to the addresses where John and my mother lived when they lived in New London. And what happens to me when I just hang out in New London? Quite a lot has happened, actually. I didn't know very much about my father because I didn't know his family, and I grew up with my mother's family, who didn't know him very well either. And my mother left me the letters, but didn't talk about him a great deal either. So what I have found is that John used to be dead, really dead in the sense that of like lifeless for me, cardboard, name on a sheet of paper, and now he isn't. very physical sort of way, part of the reason that I returned to working with ceramics is because it's very much like, it's like a dance. It's like working with a partner where you have an idea of something you want to do. You have a direction you want to move in. But this material, all materials are like this. All of life is like this, for that matter. But this material, more than most, has no form of its own. It's whatever shape you give it, which can make it seem like the perfect material. But when you start working with it, you find that there is a will somewhere besides your own, and you will find it's very much like working with a partner. It's very responsive, but in some respects it will also kind of resist. If you want it to do certain things, there's a certain kind of will at play that you can only go just so far with what you intend, and you must listen or deal with the frustrations of not listening to the material. There are days when things go very smoothly. There are days when, and you can say, "Oh, I'm very good today. I've really got it together today." You can do exactly the same thing this afternoon, tomorrow, in 10 minutes, and you can find that that same material that was so responsive has now kind of started off in a different direction. This piece is based on probably the piece that I've done so far that is most specifically based on my research in New London and Connecticut College. It is an integration of some of the information that I had from my parents' letters before I came with the information that I've gotten from being here. So what you're looking at here is a series of 8 addresses that are in New London. The one in the middle I'll talk about at the end. Each one of these little structures is a facade of a building that correlates with an address where my father lived while he lived in New London. Except for 2 of them. 2 of them were his office spaces at Connecticut College. This one, for instance, is 207 Fanning Hall. This is obviously not a replica of the entire building. It's a kind of a reminiscence of the doorway. This particular doorway is not the same doorway that's there at the moment. This part is, the doors themselves are actually the original doors that have been changed since then. What you see on the top is actually an impression of text into here, Fanning room 207. 207 is now a janitor's closet, by the way. What you see here is, it just says Department of English here. So that each one of these structures has a doorway on the front and a piece of the facsimile of a piece of paper, either a letter or, like in this case, it's kind of like letterhead. This piece over here is another one of Fanning Hall. This one is 114. This was John's office for most of the time that he was at Connecticut College, where 114 was the office of the director of the summer session, he was the director of the summer session. Some of the addresses, there's this one here was, this is 640 William Street, which I think was owned by the college at the time. What you see on the top of it is an impression of text in that will have a, it will be darkened so that you can read the text, but the papers that are on here are actually taken from a letter that my father wrote to my mother. She was in Manhattan at the time, finishing her own education, and it was a letter talking about the night that he was moving into this particular address. Some of the buildings no longer exist. They have been, this was 1948, so quite a number of changes have happened in the meantime. This particular one, for instance, this little building was 125 Mohegan. So each one of these are places that where my father lived while he was in New London. This last, this one here is actually not a place where he lived. It's the cupola at the top of Harkness Chapel. It was where his memorial service was held. He died on October 14, 1948. Okay, these are the last couple of pieces I'm going to talk about in the studio today. This particular one is a kind of thank you letter from John to the Griffis Arts Center, actually, for the opportunity to open up his files for the first time in 60 some odd years. So what I thought for a while, if I'm going to start from the center of the Griffis Arts Center, what does that look like? And I really couldn't come to any decision for the longest time. And then the magnolia tree started to bloom. And I thought, there we are, that's the center, is this magnolia. It's been a long winter in New London this year, lots of snow, so that magnolia blooming was quite sensational. So with that, I started with this particular shape. It's in process now. If you look, I'm not sure you can see this, but there's actually quite a sumptuous sort of a center in the middle of these magnolias, and this one has one. It's a bit dark at the moment, but this piece will go. It will go onto this brick, this red brick, square red brick center of the octagon. When it's finished, there'll be some leaves and various other things around the base of it. One of the things that's at play here is, is that there is a very shifting sense of perspective. You saw it in one of the other pieces. You certainly see it here. This is the actual size of the magnolia. This is obviously much larger. The bricks that are around it are much smaller. The references to the beech trees here, to the roots on the ground of the beech trees, is more or less actual size. One of the other pieces, there are a lot of roots and various things in the garden. There is a tree called the Harry Lauder walking stick. It's a marvelous kind of ceramic reference in a certain way. It's a way of working with ceramics where you roll out coils. Here's another bit of it over here. Here's one, and here's one. So again, it's not like a snapshot of the garden, so to speak. It's a reference to a lot of things that are going on in the garden right now as spring is appearing in New London. There will also, as I mentioned, this one will be a thank you letter from John thanking the Griffis Arts Center. And I'm not entirely sure what this letter is going to say because I'm not the one writing it. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that there's something about sharing a dance in the garden one evening before the project comes to a close. So, but I don't know. I'm not the one writing the letter. So, as I mentioned earlier, John had a genetic heart problem. His father died when he was young, and he also died of a heart attack. At the same time, the letters that I have that he wrote to my mother from 1935 onward, whenever they found themselves in different places, he often refers to her as sweetheart. So one of the octagons that's just in the very initial stages is a series of, it'll be 4 hearts. They're distorted. The perspective is, this is obviously a really big human heart. This area will be the rectangle. This area will be the triangle, so that you'll have one here, one here, one here, and another one here, if you can imagine that. And I think that I will call this one probably Sweetheart Attack. This was actually the first one that I did when I first started, and once again I started from the center. This one is the center. I imagined this being a kind of a flowering, so to speak, almost like, I suppose, a sort of, not exactly a self-portrait, but the role of sort of myself in the middle of what these things represent for me is actually the packages that my mother kept my father's letters in from the years of 1935 until he died in 1948. And these packages have been through a lot. They've been through floods, and they've been through a lot of moves, a lot of banging around, hot attics, and so on. So when I first began this project, I imagined that these were the packages that were all kind of like looking inward at this blossoming thing that came out of the sort of the demise of certainly John's death, and kind of a low point in their marriage as well. And I imagined that I was like, this blossom here. As I began, after I finished this one and set it aside, primarily for technical reasons, because if that's in the middle, it's very hard to work around it without damaging it. So I took that out, built this around. But as I began to build, it's kind of a premise that I work on, that I work with this partner, namely the clay that's a partner. And I do certain things, the clay does certain things. These began to be taller and taller. I imagine them being short, tall, short, tall, short, tall, and that's not the way they evolved. So at this point, these are still the packages. They are kind of where I began the project. But what has happened in the growth of the project is that I've become a person who stands a little taller than I did before I started the project. And indeed, I find that this center is not quite large enough, that in fact it needs to come a little bit larger. Not because I'm so important, but because what has come out of these packages for me has made me kind of a bigger person, so to speak.